My name is Gretchen Walsh, and I am a senior here at Smith College, and I've studied Swahili through the Five College Center for the Study of World Languages for the past 4 years. During my first semester at Smith, I was lucky enough to have a professor, Dr. Kim Dion, in the government department as my advisor, and also to serve as her research assistant on her book, Doomed Interventions, which is about HIV/AIDS interventions and largely their failure in Africa. At the time, I came into Smith as a Kentucky kid interested in studying anthropology in Africa, despite having arrived at Smith only have ever having a singular class about the continent. And Kim was determined that I would take Swahili. She knew how to sell me on the language. She was quick to pull me from considering French instead of Swahili when she said, well, you could learn the language of the colonizers, or you could learn Swahili. Now, I must say she was also quick to emphasize the structure of the Swahili classes in the 5 colleges, the one-on-one conversation sessions with native speakers, and tutorial sessions with Dr. Agnes Kimakoti, an amazing educator with a doctorate in Kiswahili. If I recall correctly, I was physically shaking with fear the first time I walked into my class with my conversation partner, who at the time was Mara. She was a Fulbright conversation partner my first year here. And her kindness went really far with a scared first-year student. Though many 5 college students often have other students in their conversation session, I was, depending on how you look at it, either lucky or unlucky to have one-on-one conversation sessions with me and the conversation partner alone for my first 2 years at Smith. So I never knew how good or bad I was at Kiswahili because it was just me and my professor in the classroom, so I was definitely pale in comparison to their skills. However, this also meant that I became creative and attempted to have deeper conversations with my conversation partner and professors. I lost count of how many confused looks I received from Agnes or Mara when I tried to say something outside of my language level. And it may be funny at this point to mention that I'm actually a biochemistry major. And trying to explain what I was learning in organic chemistry or cell biology was pretty difficult to do with an elementary level of Kiswahili. But it became quite entertaining. However, I also really welcomed those hours of laughter that I had in my Swahili classes, in contrast to my 8 a.m. cell bio lectures and my three-hour labs. And it was amazing to me how the conversation sessions eventually grew to teach me about an amazing array of topics, ranging from politics to medicine to culture. As a student with a demanding schedule of sciences, I was able to engage in such an array of fields through my Swahili classes. And there was really no restriction to the topics that I could discuss in these classes. We talked about my chemistry classes, the book that my professor was writing, and sometimes the outdated Swahili culture that was conveyed in my textbooks, and even my involvement in Smith's student organizations working for undocumented students' rights. With every conversation class, with the conversation class structure, I was able to discuss nuanced connections between these different fields, whether it was biochemistry, global health policies, and immigration policies. So though I want to emphasize I was not receiving a formal education in all of these specific topics, it was amazing to have a place where all of these topics came together. After 2 years in this environment, I was encouraged by both Agnes and my advisor Kim to study Swahili at its birthplace in Zanzibar at the State University of Zanzibar. While there, I had an individualized education again, but did have at least one other student in my class, which was nice. And again, the conversations in our class were able to cover topics that strayed from Swahili news in Zanzibar to Zanzibar culture and local transportation. I remember one time, for example, having this candid conversation with a professor in our class about dress in Zanzibar, which is a fairly conservative Muslim area, so it was surprising to learn that actually a lot of the Christian people living there still wore headscarves and buoys, and it's something you might not pick up as a tourist, but was kind of candidly shared with us in this language class. Our professor, Marlene Omar, was actually particularly interested in our English grammar, for example, and how we would mix that with our Swahili grammar in the learning process. Like in the 5 colleges, it was this structure of my Swahili classes that fostered this unique discussion forum. Both the professors and the students were kind of free to share their opinions on all these array of topics. When I thought about presenting here today, I wanted to emphasize this feature of language learning that kind of gets lost in preference for discussions of cultural exchange, and the fact that language classrooms, in my experience at least, have been unique spaces where, in order to learn all these different aspects of a language, all the different topics that you can discuss, it can be from personal to political to cultural, these forums offer just such a freedom of discussion, and you kind of have to cover all of them in order to really master the language. And I would have never really imagined that space anywhere else. So I definitely want to thank the 5 College Center for the Study of World Languages for the amazing dedication that they have to making this possible, and also a special thank you to Dr. Kimakoti, who travels across the 5 colleges from early morning to late evening, giving individualized conversation sessions and tutorial sessions catering to this environment. So moving on, seeing all these connections in language, Agnes wanted me to mention that I'm still waiting to hear back about a possible Fulbright in which I would be able to go back to Kenya, where I was last year, to do some research on neglected tropical diseases, because the intersections between these topics of language and the sciences, I think, sometimes don't get talked about, and it's really important. And this summer, I'll be with a few other Swahili students at the CLS program in Arusha to continue studying. So, thank you.